Bilateral trade between Nigeria and Australia stands around $2 billion and is estimated to grow further as talks begin to move away from giving aid to improving trade relations as well as education and agriculture. Now, that's according to the Australian High Commissioner to Nigeria, John Richardson. A few days ago, I had a chat to Mr. Richardson about this, and he's optimistic that the Nigeria-Australia trade relation that exists now will continue to grow.
At the moment, Australia is actually quite a large importer of oil, crude oil, from Nigeria, in fact. I think in recent years it's been as high as $2 billion worth imported from Nigeria, reduced a bit over the last year, I believe. From an Australian point of view, we have exported in recent years quite a lot of wheat to Nigeria. Wheat that's processed into flour and used in such food products as pasta, semavita, that many people will have in Nigeria. We also sell some specialist machinery and steel products for the construction industry. Has been quite a significant item in recent years. So I think those would be the main products. The balance of trade is very much in Nigeria's favour. We're trying to increase the exports from Australia to Nigeria. Beyond oil and crude oil products, it's not so easy for Nigeria to find a niche in Australia in terms of many, say, agricultural products, because Australia is also a very strong agricultural producer and exporter itself. We're trying to diversify a bit, or Australian companies are, and there's a strong Australian presence in what I might call consultancy, infrastructure, engineering projects. So those are services that are being sold to the Nigerian industry, and a number of quite important Australian companies have a presence in Nigeria trying to develop those services.
How much has bilateral trade between both countries grown in recent times?
Well, Australian companies, I'm sure, would be interested to develop opportunities in that sector. We do have some very advanced technology and services in different aspects of agriculture. It often depends on from industry to industry, but we do have very high productivity in certain areas of agriculture. I mentioned wheat, which is not a typical product that you would grow in Nigeria, but for example, beef cattle. Australia is the largest beef cattle exporter in the world. We are one of the largest producers of sugarcane. So if these are industries that are growing in Nigeria, that some of that expertise would certainly be transferable to Nigeria. And we've had some preliminary contacts between different people in the industries in Nigeria and Australia to see what might be possible there in terms of cooperating in the development of those industries. The numerous avenues, we do have our own government services working in Nigeria, our High Commission and the Australian Trade Commission can help put exporters and businesses in touch with each other. I think also just generally creating better understanding, more well-informed business communities in both countries who understand the capabilities and the possibilities in the other country. I think in terms of Nigeria, it needs to continue to work to strengthen the business environment, to create investor confidence. To some degree, people in Australia haven't always been aware of the opportunities in Nigeria or the potential, and have been a little bit cautious, perhaps because of some of the way Nigeria gets presented in a simplistic way in the international news, concentrating on negative things. So it's partly there to get the story out of the path that Nigeria can take, and of course Nigeria itself can, if it does good work in terms of strengthening governance and rule of law, creating a more friendly business environment, or continue to strengthen that, that will, I think, be the best way of encouraging trade.
Now, in terms of strengthening governance, the President has actually started something in this regard, especially with regards reducing corruption. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, I think everyone in Nigeria has welcomed that, and I think, of course, it certainly will be a strong factor in increasing investor confidence. I think many companies these days do have strong inhibitions about taking any risks in a business environment where there could be corruption. It's not just about corruption too, it's about predictability of policy and regulation, capacity of government to implement rules and programs and policies, and also the rule of law, that if people get into commercial disputes, they can rely on a strong independent legal system and judiciary.
About 3 years ago, Australia and Nigeria signed a memorandum of understanding covering, among other things, economic and commercial cooperation. How much has this achieved since then?
Well, it's the idea of that MOU was a general expression of intent by both governments to foster and facilitate trade and investment. Of course, I think both governments see this as something that has to be private sector driven. You can't take the horse to water, let alone make them drink. I mean, it has to be the initiative of private sector to make trade and investment happen. But we're here to advise, to help, to inform the private sector, and I think we've seen some good progress. We're seeing more, as I said, more Australian companies in the mining sector starting to explore and look at the opportunities in Nigeria. We're seeing quite a few in the infrastructure and engineering sectors, different capacities there. We have some of our biggest engineering consultancy companies in Nigeria having a presence, and one of our major investment banks, our largest international investment bank, has funded public-private partnerships in Nigeria. So there's a continuing interest, particularly in that sector, and I think more and more. And as I said, there's been the beginnings of discussions about agricultural cooperation or commercial cooperation in the agricultural sector. And one of the biggest areas, I might add, although we think of it as purely education or people-to-people links a lot of the time, but a lot of students are now going from Nigeria to study in Australia. And that, in fact, is a form of trade insofar as not only do we have scholarships from the Australian government, we've provided nearly 100 master's scholarships over the last 5 years. But there's also a lot of paying students which we welcome from Nigeria, which also increases the people-to-people ties. I think the numbers have grown from about 400 in 2010 to 1,400 now, so rapidly growing. And in fact, we're going to have an education fair in Lagos later this month, in the 25th and 6th of September on Victoria Island and Cages. So I think 17 Australian universities will be participating in that. So we do hope it attracts some interest from those Nigerian students and their parents who are interested in study overseas.
With global commodity prices fluctuating, what should most economies dependent on such commodities, including Nigeria, be focusing on now?
I think our experience is most relevant in terms of the mining sector, the solid minerals sector, more than the oil sector, which is, of course, most crucial to Nigeria in the immediate term, in the sense of revenues and exports. And the longer term, I think the key is to position ourselves for an upturn in the commodity cycle. Many of the major commodities, iron ore is a very good example, coal, copper, are very depressed. The prices are very depressed, which means it's very difficult, even with the best of intentions, to get new investment in some of those sectors. Although in some specialty minerals, or like, for example, lead and zinc, there are some Australian companies in Nigeria who are looking at new projects and quite optimistic that things can move ahead in the not too distant future. Gold is a bit in between, and there's some potential there too, one or two companies working in that sector. I think the key thing for Nigeria is to position itself. It's done a lot of work in developing the structures and the legal framework for mining, and it's the broader things that the President is talking about: rule of law and strengthening governance and infrastructure in particular. Improving all those things will increase investor confidence, and security as well is something that a lot of investors will look at. So many of these companies are very keen to come and explore, but ultimately they have to get finance from international capital markets, banks or investment funds or the share market, and they look very cautiously often at all the ingredients that go into make a successful project. So every country that is competing to get that investment needs to work hard at all angles, all those various angles. But it's an area that we've also been working with the Nigerian government in terms of cooperation through some training programs in the governance of the mining sector, different aspects such as the financial, revenue systems, legal systems, environment, safety and so forth. So that's an area we hope we can continue to assist and cooperate in.